Have you ever had a feeling that people are no longer being completely honest with you? The reports look positive, meetings go smoothly, people agree with your ideas, nobody raises concerns, everything appears fine. And then suddenly something unexpected happens. A key employee resigns, a customer leaves, a project struggles, a problem emerges that many people seem to have known about. And you find yourself wondering, if people knew, why didn't anyone tell me? This question is more common than most leaders realize. And it does not only affect leaders, it affects parents, business owners, managers, entrepreneurs, professionals, and anyone whose decisions influence other people. The interesting thing is this: people rarely wake up one morning and decide, from today, I will stop telling the truth. The process is much quieter. It happens gradually, one conversation at a time, one reaction at a time, one experience at a time. Let me share a story. A senior leader once told me, my team never tells me what's really going on. And I asked him, how do you know? He smiled and said, because I hear the real conversations after the meetings. And that caught my attention. So I asked him to explain. And he said, during the meeting, everyone agrees. The meeting ends. People walk out. Then the real discussion begins. Concerns appear, risk appear, alternative viewpoints appear, questions appear. The conversation becomes richer, more honest, more detailed, and many organizations have experienced some version of this. The official meetings end, the unofficial meetings begin. What fascinates me is not that people talk afterwards. Human beings naturally process ideas through conversations. What fascinates me is what that behavior reveals. It reveals that some thoughts felt safer outside the room than inside it. And that observation is important because truth travels through safety. People speak openly when they feel safe during so. People become selective. When safety begins to reduce, this pattern appears everywhere in organizations, in families, in friends, friendships, the politics, even in history. And by the way, the biggest reason people stop telling the truth is not what most leaders expect. We will come to that shortly. But for now, let's explore something deeper. Many leaders believe honesty depends on the character of the people around them. Character certainly matters, yet honesty is also influenced by the environment. Imagine two different situations. In the first situation, someone shares a concern. The concern is heard, questions are asked, the discussion continues. In the second situation, someone shares a concern. The response feels uncomfortable. The person feels exposed. The discussion quickly moves on. Both situation teaches the person and it teaches a lesson. Human beings learn from experiences. Every interaction teaches people something about what is welcome and what is risky. Over time, people adapt, not because they are dishonest, because they are human. This is one reason leaders occasionally lose access to valuable information. The information still exists. The information simply changes location. It moves into private conversations, hallway conversations, WhatsApp conversations, lunch conversations, conversations after the meeting. A few years ago, I observed something similar while traveling. I was standing at the airport check in counter. A passenger approached the desk with a complaint. The airline employee listened politely. The conversation ended. Passenger walked away. A few moments later, the staff members started discussing the real issue amongst themselves. The information was there all along. The concern was understood. The understanding existed. The location of the conversation changed. That observation stayed with me. Because organizations often function in exactly the same way. Information is present, the question becomes where is it being discussed and who has access to it? This is where leadership becomes interesting. Because leadership is not only about making decisions, leadership is also about creating environments where reality can travel freely. And throughout history, some of the most successful leaders understood this principle remarkably well. One of them was Chanakya, and his insight into truth, power, and leadership remains incredibly relevant today. So far, we explored something many leaders have experienced. The meetings ends, the real conversation begins, the information exists. The challenge is that it is no longer reaching the person who needs it. And this is where Chanakya offers an important insight. Chanakya spent years preparing Chandragupta Maurya for leadership. He understood economics, politics, governance, human behavior, and one principle appears repeatedly in his teachings. A ruler must remain connected to reality. Reality, not praise. Reality. Because power changes the flow of information. The moment people see someone as powerful, influential, or important, their behavior begins to shift. Words become more carefully chosen. Opinions become more selective. Concerns become more measured. Information starts getting filtered. And it is not because people are trying to deceive, because human beings naturally evaluate consequences. Every person asks an invisible question before speaking. What will happen if I say this? This answer to that question shapes behavior. Let's think about a workplace. An employee notices a risk, a mistake, a concern, a different perspective. And before speaking, the mind quickly evaluates the situation. Will this be welcomed? Will this create discomfort? Will this affect my relationship? Will this create tension? Will anything change? Within seconds, a decision is made: speak or stay silent. Now imagine that process repeatedly hundreds of times across an organization. Over months, over years, a culture begins to form, and that culture shapes the quality of information flowing through the organization. A leader may believe people are withholding information. Reality is often more subtle. People are responding to the environment they are experiencing. I once worked with a senior leader who genuinely wanted honest feedback. He cared about his team. He valued improvement. He encouraged people to speak up. Yet something interesting was happening. Whenever someone disagreed with him, he immediately explained his position. He and his intervention was positive. He wanted people to understand his thinking. Over time, the team learned something. The leader always had an answer, and people gradually shared fewer concerns. The leader remained committed to openness. The team's behavior changed. And this is where leadership becomes fascinating. Intentions influence behavior. Experiences influence behaviors too. People respond to what they repeatedly experience. And this brings us to another important pattern: the experience of always being right. A leader develops expertise, experience grows, knowledge grows, confidence grows. People begin seeking their opinion. Their decisions create results. Their influence expands. These are valuable things, yet a subtle shift can begin. Questions becomes fewer, challenges becomes less, and they become less frequent. Alternative viewpoints become less visible. The leader still wants honesty. The environment begins producing more agreements. Agreement feels comfortable. Agreement feels efficient. It also feels smooth. And agreement quietly changes the quality of information. One of the most dangerous moments in leadership is when every meeting feels easy, when every idea receives support, even every proposal receives approval. And when every discussion feels harmonious, because reality is rarely that simple. Organizations are complex. Human beings are also complex. Customers are equally complex. Markets are complex. And complexity naturally creates different viewpoints. When different viewpoints disappear, information often disappears with them. A few years ago, I observed something interesting at a family gathering. Several family members were discussing where to organize a celebration. One person immediately offered a suggestion. Everyone nodded. Everyone agreed. The discussion ended. And later, in smaller groups, alternative ideas started appearing. Different preferences emerged. Different concerns emerged. Different perspectives emerged. The viewpoints existed all along. The setting influenced. Whether they were expressed, leadership teams often experience something similar. The question is not whether people have opinions. The question is where those opinions are being shared. And that leads us to a powerful realization. People do not stop having thoughts. People do not stop noticing problems. People do not stop seeing risk. The location of the conversation changes. The truth continues to exist, and access to the truth changes. And that creates an important challenge. How does a leader create an environment where reality can travel freely? Because the leader who receives the truth early often makes stronger decisions. The leader who receives the truth later often spends more time dealing with consequences. The relationship between truth and trust is fascinating. Think about the people with whom you are completely honest, the people with whom you can share your uncertainty, your mistakes, concerns, embarrassing moments, difficult and uh, diverse opinions. The honesty exists because truth exists. Truth creates safety, and safety allows truth to travel. One of the most beautiful examples of this comes from the Mahabharata. Consider the conversation between Krishna and Arjun. Arjun did not arrive on the battlefield pretending to have all the answers. He expressed confusion, doubt, fear, conflict, questions. He spoke openly about what he was experiencing. And that conversation became possible because trust already existed. And when trust exists, difficult conversations become easier. Questions become easier. Truth becomes easier. And many leaders want honest feedback. Many teams want open communication. Many organizations want transparency. Trust is often the bridge connecting all the three. A few years ago, a senior manager shared an experience with me. He told me that one member of his team always brought him bad news early: project risk, customer concerns, potential mistakes. And at first, he found it frustrating. Over time, he realized something very important. The employee who was helping him see reality sooner, reality arrives eventually. Some people helps us see it earlier, and that ability becomes incredibly valuable. Practically in leadership, because small problems are usually easier to address than large problems, a concern raised early is information. The same concern raised 6 months later may become a crisis. The challenge is that leaders occasionally teach people to remain silent without realizing it. A person raises a concern. The response feels dismissive. A person shares an idea. The response feels rushed. A person offers feedback and the response feels defensive. And nobody announces a decision to stop speaking. People simply adjust. The next time they become more careful. And then a little more careful. And then a little more selective. And eventually, the conversation changes. The silence arrives gradually. This is why access to the truth is one of the greatest leadership advantages, and not intelligence, not experience, not even authority. Access to the truth. Because truth helps leaders make better decisions. Truth helps organizations solve problems easier. Truth helps leadership and relationships remain healthy. Truth helps teams adapt. Truth helps businesses evolve. I often ask leaders a very simple question. If your team knew something very important today, would they feel comfortable telling you? The answer to that question reveals a great deal, and it reveals a quality of truth, the quality of safety, the quality of communication, and often the quality of leadership. An interesting thing happens when people trust a leader. The leader receives more information, more perspectives, more concerns, more ideas, more reality. And reality is incredibly useful. Reality allows better decisions. Reality allows faster learning. Reality also allows meaningful growth. A leader does not need people to agree with every idea. A leader benefits from people sharing what they genuinely see. And that is where value exists. That is where insight exists. That is where awareness exists. Many years ago, Chanakya emphasized the importance of remaining connected to reality. Today, the principle remains unchanged. The change is not whether truth exists. Truth is always present. The question is whether it can travel. Can it travel from employees to leaders? Can it travel from customers to organizations? Can it travel from reality to decision making? The answer often depends on the trust. As we bring this conversation to a close, I want to leave you with one reflection. People rarely stop having opinions. They rarely stop noticing the risk. They rarely stop seeing problems. And sometimes they stop sharing them. The silence that appears in organizations is rarely empathy. It often contains informations, concerns, questions, observations, possibilities. The leader who remains curious about that silence often discovers something very important. And leaders who create environments where truth can travel freely often makes better decisions long before everyone else understands why. Thank you for watching this video. I am Dr. Vandana Shah, and my firm Arya works with CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders who want to strengthen leadership effectiveness, improve decision making, build trust, and create greater organizational impact. We help leaders develop deeper awareness, stronger influence, and more meaningful leadership conversations so they can lead people, their teams, and organizations with greater clarity. Book a 30-minute chemistry call with me. The link is in the description below. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.